Well, eBay has done it again. They've changed the policy, you know, unless you just read all of their policy changes as they go. You don't know until you try. And we had something banned again on eBay. They were very nice about it. They didn't blame me. They said, oh, our policy has changed and your item appears to be something you're not allowed to sell. The item in question was this. Well, actually, it was something similar to this, because this is made of bone, but I believe that they thought it was made of ivory, or they have just decided not to allow bone at all because so many people were gaming the system by claiming that ivory was faux bone and continuing to sell ivory in defiance of their policies. And it's too bad because what I had was similar to this. This one is German. The one I was selling was American. And this is a little Victorian pocket calendar with the days of the week where you put all your memos on with a little pencil and then you could erase it. It's a really great piece. And so was the one that I sold, but I didn't sell it on eBay. Fortunately, one of the people who was bidding on my eBay listing said, hey, what happened to the listing? And I said, well, it got canned. And they emailed me and said, well, I'm still interested in the piece. So they ended up getting the piece for $50. It was made of bone. It was legal to sell. It was not elephant ivory. One of the big problems with the elephant ivory selling ban is that they have taken the antique dealers who know the difference between new and old out of the equation. So now you only have people left in the ivory market who are scurrilous and up to no good and want to sell new ivory or don't care. And it's causing more poaching, and it's a real problem. And I feel very badly for the elephants because these well-meaning laws are actually making the destruction of elephants worse and increasing the trade in illegal ivory. So it's unfortunate, but I know eBay just has to follow the rules that they're given to. So I don't blame them for this. If you look at the back there, you'll see this does not have a herringbone pattern. And that is how you can tell elephant ivory. So this should have been okay to sell. It was okay for me to sell privately, and that's what we'll do with these kinds of things in the future. However, we did sell 19 out of 20 items that we listed on eBay in June, and I want to show you what sold and what we got for them and what the top dollar people got for the same or a similar item in those categories were, and talk about why certain things do better at certain times online when you're selling, and also get to see some really cool stuff in a few of these categories that is just amazing. So let's get started. We're going to start with the things that sold as buy it nows. We do put this out for our members a little bit in advance if you're a level 2 or level 3 member, because the members' contributions help us with the cost of taking the extra time and doing the deep dives into these items. And so a few of these items did sell buy it now. The first one is this. This is a really cute celluloid kit, and celluloid being the early plastic, one of really the first kinds of plastic made. This was done about 1910. All of the little nail kit pieces are in great shape and intact. You've got the file and the cuticle pusher and some other things. This is about the time that women really start using makeup, using clear nail polish, things like that. And part of the reason is that a lot of women went to work in World War I, and also most places had electricity, and bright lights showed skin blemishes and unevenness in a way that had not been visible before. So you needed your nails to be a little stronger, and you wanted to look good, and were a little more appearance conscious than maybe previous generations. And so kits like this were taken around by the Flappers and the Gibson girls. I love the tassel. It's just a really sweet little set. Nail care really was something that went all the way back to the times of the Egyptians and the Babylonians, but it wasn't practiced by most women until the 20th century. Marie Antoinette was the first woman to have a little kit like this that she could take around, and it became very popular in social circles in France to be seen with this sort of a thing. But then the French Revolution came, and Marie Antoinette and nail kits disappeared for a long time. This one was really sweet. We listed it at $30 because we thought that that was a fair price if someone wanted it, and it sold right away on a buy it now. And the same collector got this piece She lives in Georgia. I figured this would go to somebody living in Georgia because it is just such an obvious thing for it to go back home. This is an Augusta, Georgia insurance and banking currency note, a $1 note. This one is dated 1861, so we are in the time of the Civil War. But these were actually being produced before the Civil War for them by American Banknote of New York City, who just continued to produce for various banks, both in the North and the South of the United States through the Civil War, including the U.S. government. It wasn't until about 1900 that the U.S. government decided that due to counterfeiting and other things, they needed to take over the printing of banknotes themselves. But American Banknote has printed stamps and bills for countries all over the world and still does produce for some countries. This one was presented in a frame, and it has Florence Nightingale on the front. It may be one of the first examples of a woman being on a bill in history. The other thing that was interesting about it, it was in a frame because it was sold originally by Antiquities Limited, and they made a point of saying it was rare with their 1974 corporate seal and seal of authenticity. It is genuine, but it is not rare. Now, they're scarce, but rare is a pet peeve of mine. We are going to see some things later in this broadcast that are truly rare. Truly rare means a handful of them were produced, or only a handful survive for some reason, and that we know that there's only a handful of them. And we're talking very small quantities. These are available, they're scarce. They don't come up that often, but you'll see others that sold on eBay, and you will see others in the future that sell on eBay because they are not rare. So please be careful if you're using the term rare to know that the piece you're representing really is, because otherwise, honestly, it's misleading. And we don't like to mislead in this business because reputation is everything in the antique business. But this is genuine. It is really cool. It sold for $75 on one bid. That was about the median price I saw these selling for. Now, this one sold for even more. It sold for $99. Now, why did theirs sell for $24 more than mine? Well, this was sold by a company that is a currency dealer. They are a specialist. This is all they do. Specialists typically get more for the same item than somebody like me who's a generalist and just happens to come across one, because people who collect currency are going back to this dealer over and over because they know that that person has the thing they collect. Whereas for me, it might just be I get something that somebody collects and they love it, and then I don't have another thing like that for a while. So that is the reason specialists typically get more money, whether you're at a show or in an antique mall or online. So that is something to consider if you're selling online. Do you want to be a specialist or do you want to be a generalist? I love everything, as you're about to see, so I like being a generalist. Next up is this, the Royal Copenhagen 2-ounce. This is from about 1980. This is back when Swank Products was having this made for them. And the formulation back then was a little spicier. Now that Swank doesn't make it anymore, it's a little more powdery and frankly a little more old man smelling. And because of that, the interest is in these older ones for people who are collecting it for the scent. And the person who got this for $29 on a Buy It Now absolutely wanted it for a scent because I believe it was her father who wore this. And it was very sweet. I got a note saying, well, I got it and it came in great condition. And I put one little dab on just as a remembrance of that smell, and I'm keeping the rest of it. And I thought that was really neat. And that is the reason that people buy fragrances online, is because they want it to smell good. They want to actually still use it. A lot of these things are discontinued. Now, there was a rumor recently that eBay was not going to allow cosmetics and fragrances to be sold anymore. It turns out that's not exactly true. But do look at their policies when you're selling this kind of thing, just as their policy regarding the bone items has changed. Well, the policy regarding fragrances and cosmetics is very clear. It cannot have been decanted out of the original packaging into another package, for example. So you want to make sure that you're doing it right, because otherwise, well, eBay will take your listing down. This also sold as a buy it now. I don't know the story behind the collector and why they wanted it, but I thought it was really cool. And I was fortunate that I was able to capture it in a good light so you could see that it had this golden color to it, because the next one below, we got the most of any that had sold in this period of time. The next one below us only sold for $12, and that's because it looked more like my second picture, where it's indefinite, it's very dark, you can't really tell the color of the piece. And the only reason I added this picture was because I wanted people to be able to see the shank and the way that it had this twist. And you could tell that in the second picture. Pictures are really important. There's a listing I'll show you later that I did where the picture, honestly, probably would have gotten more money if I had switched the picture out. But when you're on a deadline, sometimes you just use what you got. Now, this piece was the first that sold at open bid, and it went for $46 on 22 bids. And I can't say I was surprised, even though it was just a little plastic toy pencil sharpener that some kid had in school back in the 1950s, because this is early 50s. On the back, you have the KLM mark. This was a German company that made plastics at the time. You'll see their mark on other things, especially games and that sort of thing from the time. But the reason that this did so well is because it is the early style television, like the Dumont televisions back when that was a network and they made TVs before 1955. That little dark spot there is similar to a Stanhope in that you look inside it, and then there on the top you see a wheel. And when you turn that wheel, well, lo and behold, you see, as it's the 50s, Western scenes. You see a cowboy, you see someone being shot, you see a horse, and there was a fourth one. And I hope the person who got this is really delighting in it. I would love to find some way to be able to film when I do the video, putting these things out on the listings to show the insides of some of this stuff, but I haven't figured that out yet. If any one of you has figured out that camera trick, please let me know. But this did rather well, and I can't say I was surprised because I have never seen this variety before. You see 10 years later where it's the standard television you think of from the 60s, and they're a flash view, but they don't have scenes inside like this. This also sold for $46.54 to be precise. This is the Packard Panther Daytona. This was a wonderful concept car done in 1954 when Packard was trying to establish itself as a really strong engine that could go really fast because they were competing with Cadillac and Lincoln. They had always outcompeted them and they were suddenly falling behind in the marketplace. That had a lot to do with the fact that Cadillac and Lincoln were involved in the big three price wars. They were competing on volume and lowering the prices on everything, and the independent companies couldn't really compete. And Packard indeed went out of production a few years later. My mother tried to help contribute to Packard sales in 1955, though, because her first husband and her brother-in-law went off drinking at a bar down the street in Washington, D.C., and left her sister and she at home with my sister, who was a baby and needed formula, and they did not come back. And out of desperation, my mom and her sister, neither of whom had ever driven a car before, got in his car because it said it was an automatic. So that means it must drive itself, right? Well, they got about 3 blocks and then plowed into a parked truck, totaled the Packard, then tearfully explained to the police when they came to see what was up. And instead of getting in trouble, the police went to the bar and yanked her soon-to-be ex-husband and her brother-in-law out, and they got the ticket and the fine and had a destroyed car to boot. So I presume that he would have gone back and bought another Packard, but my mom left him right after that, and so that's where the money went. And I can't say that I blame her. This piece I thought was really neat. This is a Fred Thompson print. I got this and I paid a little more than I usually would because I wanted to show you folks and because I haven't had one to put online and I wanted to see how it would do. And thankfully it did pretty well. It got $40 on 4 bids. Very interesting stylized signature. Thompson and his son were contemporaries and colleagues of Wallace Nutting. And so you see the similarity in that it is a scene from Maine in this case. And wonderful color tinting. This actually went to a collector with a connection to Maine. The colors were strong. It's a neat piece, and it sold for about the right price for one of their landscapes. Landscapes like this from New England and those parts were very popular in the 19 teens, not just because they depicted the landscapes of the time, but because they were a nostalgic throwback to what was. The 19 teens were a time with a lot of immigration and then World War I. And so a lot of people hankered for an earlier time when America was a little different. And there was a real revival of interest in colonial era architecture, furniture styles, and prints that showed bucolic scenes of the way it was before there were a lot of people settling there. Now, there was a Thompson print that did better on eBay at the time that we sold this one, and it was this picture with the sailboat. Sailboating had changed in the 1910s and become a moment of idle and a fun sport, and was no longer required because there were motorboats starting to be made. And so because of that, sailboats again became a scene from the past. And that was part of the reason that there was nostalgia for them as well. Anything to do with sailboats, nautical things, definitely has a bigger collector following. And so this one went for $75, even though the size was about the same. This was just a beautiful piece. I was so excited to get it. I thought it was gorgeous. I knew it would do well, and it really did. It sold for $73 on 14 bids. There is a name for this open work where there's just a little bit of the fabric. I think they call it punch out or something like that. Someone left me a comment and told me, and hopefully they'll leave it again in this video so that you'll all know. But I believe that's what it was called. And it just had such a neat effect overall. Now, when I took a picture from a distance, you didn't really see the colors, and that's why I used the close-up. And I noticed other people who took pictures of these often did that as well. However, one piece similar to this sold for more, and they took the picture on a mannequin. And that was smart because their piece has a wonderful peacock on it, and that is the reason it sold for more money. It went for $100. And I'm not surprised because that was such a great piece. It also had a label, which mine did not. Theirs was labeled J&X New York. So now I know I have to go find one with the peacock because that is another really gorgeous piece. The quintessential Viking glass mushroom in avocado green. This is a wonderful piece, well made. This came out around 1970. Blanco and Viking both made the mushrooms for about a 5-year period in the early 70s when that motif was so popular originally. It is so popular again now. And this one went for $93 on 22 bids, even though it has one little factory bubble in it that you can see. The quality of these really is so good overall. And I thought the picture did it justice. It showed good color. Some things photograph better in natural light, and that's what I was able to use. You can even see all the little striations on the underside. Good pictures do matter when you're selling online. However, one sold for even more. This one sold for $135. And it is no different than mine except for one factor, and that is that it has the red label. Viking used a red foil label up until about 1970, and then switched to a clear sticker kind of label. And so this is a very early piece in the mushroom production in the Epic line. And I think that's the reason that it actually sold for even more than mine did. I was very pleased with what we got for this. It was more than I imagined, but these are just so wildly popular now. The Weller piece also did well. This went for $107.50 on 21 bids. This was not signed on the bottom. Some of the forest lines are, some of them are not. They generally, if they have any signature, it's an ink stamp. Although I suspect a few also had the embossed Weller in capital letters that looks like a typewriter typed it. This one only has a number on it. That is the decorator's number, so that if there was a problem coming off the line, they could go back to the decorator and figure out what was going on. Like, say, the glazes were not right or not in the right place, or they were bleeding or running, or the color was off. That's how they could do their quality control, because the color was really important in this line. Their Austrian designer did this based on the woods of Austria that he remembered from childhood. And so it has real depth to it. I was very pleased that it went for what it did and got 21 bids. But I also tried really hard to clean it and thought I did a wonderful job. In person, before I got it in natural light to take the picture, you couldn't tell that it had been cleaned from where a plant had been inside. Unfortunately, when I took the picture, the remaining lime scale, which honestly to the naked eye up close was not really that visible, looks very visible in that picture. And that is the reason that I did not get the most for my piece. Another one of these actually sold for more. It went for $145, and that is because it looked like this. Absolutely pristine and clean. So whoever got mine got to save about $40, and in return will have to use a little bit of elbow grease. But honestly, it looked a lot better than the picture shows. Natural light is great because it brings out all the features. Natural light also is very unflattering sometimes. So that is something to consider when you're taking pictures. Now, I did, of course, state in the listing that the piece had been cleaned because I don't ever want to misrepresent the condition of things. Condition is so important to a lot of collectors, especially of pottery and glass and production pieces. And so I always want to make sure they know what they're getting. This just overemphasized the condition. And that's okay because I was happy with what I got, and I'm happy that the collector who got it was satisfied and got a good deal. That was also true of this piece. This is the Tom Sawyer Island map from Disneyland, and this is the 1957 brochure. Tom Sawyer Island was one of the first attractions at Disneyland. They got its own separate brochure. And here is the cover. I did not use this picture first, partly because I thought the map was more interesting looking, partly because it fit a square picture frame better in the thumbnails that eBay uses, and partly because, for some reason in the natural light, this looks very yellowed, which was not really the case, but it just had a strange camera effect. Here you see the back, and that's a little more true to the color. Now, Tom Sawyer Island, which today is a hodgepodge of Tom Sawyer and Pirates of the Caribbean type attractions, had some interesting things in the 50s that are not there anymore. Injun Joe's Cave is no longer called that because, of course, in the 50s, like we saw with the little television viewer, cowboys and Indians and all things Western were very popular on TV and in movies and with children. Well, now we don't use terms like that. This is a fun attraction, though. One of the reasons they added this to Disneyland was because one of the big complaints by parents in the early days was, well, we took our kids and the rides were fun, but there was nowhere for them to run around and let out their excess energy. And so they invented this so that there were places that kids could run all over the place on a nice, safe island with lots of stuff. There's the burning settlers cabin up at the top there. In what then was Indian territory, the terms of treaty prevent entry. Well, the reason the entry is prohibited is partly because Disney likes to store some of their props there. And so they did not want kids getting into that. But Tom Sawyer Island is one of the attractions that still exists at Disneyland and some of the other parks. And there's Huck's Treehouse, the highest point in Disneyland. Well, not anymore. Cinderella's Castle beat it. This is a cool piece. I thought it was a lot of fun, and I think whoever got it is having fun with it. I got $17.50. There is one that went for a little bit more, and here it is. And why did this one get $3 more than mine? Well, because mine had very gently been folded once in the middle, and I did disclose that, whereas this one is absolutely flat and pristine. So it's all a level of conditions. Mine was in very good condition. The other one was in near mint condition. And that certainly does deserve a $3 premium. So I felt really good about getting $17.50 on 8 bids. This piece, on the other hand, well, there was not another one like it. And I'm always fond of saying, have the best one, the cheapest one, or the only one, wherever you're selling. And this was the only one. And I'm not surprised because I have never seen this piece before. This is Bartlett Collins out of Oklahoma, and they made this for the bicentennial, and they took one of their regular vases and made a stretch swung vase out of it. It is one of the most unusual swung vases I've seen in that it's footed. It's done with a screen print paint that is cold. That's why the stars are elongated as you get down into it. And this is very different than the solid color swung vases that we usually see. It's only 14 inches high, which for a swung vase is on the small side, but there's such a uniqueness to it. The color was really strong. I really enjoyed this piece. I owned it. I sold it to someone. They sold it back to me, and now it's gone to its forever home. And I'm very pleased for the person who got it because I don't know when you'll see another one of these. And there was not another one on eBay during the period of time when this one sold. And that is why it went for $107.50 on 21 bids. And I was very excited about that because I thought it was something that was truly special, and definitely the interest in it reflected that. This piece also did very well. This is a Scottish kilt pin, sterling, and I saw it as amethyst. Someone else told me afterwards they thought it was a different semi-precious stone. The person who got the piece was not concerned either way, but it is definitely sterling. The stones are definitely semi-precious. I thought it was a really pretty piece and a really interesting piece. It is a kilt pin, of course. The kilt pins were worn on the outside of the kilt to give weight to it so that they wouldn't blow open and reveal parts of us that are not meant to be revealed. The middle section here, you see the real delicacy, the fineness of the work in the silver. So this was a really nicely made piece. And that is why it went for $76 on 12 bids. Here you can see the sterling mark on the back and on the other piece as well. There was only one other dagger-shaped kilt pin that sold in the period of time that this one sold, and it only went for $25, but it was not made of sterling and it did not have stones in it. So it really has a lot to do with quality. Everything sells for the price it should, but it has to do with the level of detail, design, and the quality of the materials. This is a neat set. I really enjoyed this. Here's the cover by itself. Such great color. This is 53 of the latest views as shown on playing cards from A Century of Progress World's Fair in Chicago. And I love that view of the Travel and Transport building. I'm sure it was a beautiful fair to walk around. And you could tell that when you played with the cards because there are scenes from all over the fair on these cards, including the rickshaw on the Joker. Yes, you could be pulled around in a rickshaw at the 1933 to 34 Chicago World's Fair. It was so popular, they held it over for a second year, and they reissued the cards with other views. That's why this says latest views, because the views actually changed a little bit as the attractions changed at the fair. This went for $19.50 on 7 bids, which is just about the right price. That's what they typically sell for. There was one version with the same views on it that went higher, though, and it is this one here. This one has the same views on the cards, but the back of the cards are I like to call it the planetary design from the Chicago World's Fair. This wonderful Buck Rogers space age looking thing with the black and then the planet with the big comet-like design going into it. So Art Deco, so streamlined. This whole fair was just a real treat for anybody who was wowed by Art Deco design and American streamlined moderne of that era, because that was the overarching design theme, again, as you see on the cover of the deck that I sold. So this was really fun for me, and I think it'll be a fun walk through the World's Fair for the person who bought it. The other Royal Copenhagen piece that I sold was this interestingly shaped plate that commemorates the beating of the 3 kings of Scandinavia. And that was a big deal because Norway had been subjugated to Sweden until 1905 and had broken away. And this was done in 1914. So it was the first time that the Swedish monarch and the restored Norwegian monarch had met since that time. This meeting had to do with the decision to remain neutral during World War I. This was done in December of 1914, and the war had just started a couple of months before, and the Scandinavian kings decided indeed that they would remain neutral during the First World War because they had trade and connections with Germany as well as with England and France, and also because they were pretty close to Germany. And as unfortunately Norway and Denmark found in the Second World War, being next to Germany during a world war is not a great place to be. So they made what was a good decision for them at the time, although a lot of other countries in Europe were not very happy with it. We also had made that decision, and we swore that we were not going to get involved in World War I. Woodrow Wilson actually won re-election in 1916, promising that he would not take us into World War I, which he promptly reneged on and took us into World War I. So neutrality was definitely an option in that period of time, more than is often the case now when war comes to be. This is a piece that we don't see too often. It went for $27 on 3 bids. Now, there were no other pieces like this for sale at the time, but there was a big sale of a Royal Copenhagen item at the same time, and I think it will surprise you as it did me, because that piece was this. This is the 1911 Christmas Eve plate. Yule often means Christmas Eve because of the Danish tradition of taking cookies to your neighbors on Christmas Eve. So they started making plates for you to do that. In 1911, they decided that they wanted to have more cookies, I guess, because they increased the size from 6 inches to 7 inches. But a handful of these were made in the 6-inch size, and they were supposed to be destroyed. And somebody apparently got a case and took them out of the factory. And because of that, fewer than 100 exists. Now we're talking rare. When you use the term rare, that's the kind of scenario. The rarest U.S. coin is the 1913 Liberty Head nickel. And the reason it's rare is because the Buffalo nickel replaced it that year, and the mint decreed that all of the Liberty Head nickels for 1913 should be melted down. And somebody stole 5 of them and took them out. They are worth millions of dollars, and there are only 5. That's rare. So when you use the term rare, that's what we're talking about. So this Royal Copenhagen Christmas plate sold for $6,000. So when you hear that, oh, those things don't sell anymore, no matter what it is, question that, because everything sells at some price and there's always some exception to the rule. There are Jim Beam bottles that sell for money. There are a few Avon bottles that sell for money. There are Funko Pops that sell for money. Maybe the majority of them never will. Maybe most Beanie Babies could be put in a shredder and no one would miss them. But there are a few that are very valuable. So never say never. This piece I thought was so nicely done, and since I'm spending a lot of time in the Northwest right now, it was fun to find something that was ethnographic. This is made in Alaska by Alaska Black Diamond. Pat Moore and his wife are the people behind Alaska Black Diamond. They have a park full of huge totems, and you can see that if you go up on the Alaska cruises to the Ketchikan area. This is a miniature example. And you can see they sold for $125 new. There's the Pat Moore signature. And they have the lore, and it explains the totem. In this case, this one is called The Shaman's Daughter, and it has a story about how the shaman looks to the sky hoping for rain. And that's why you see the frog at the bottom. It refers to the daughter talking to the eagle. Totems are traditionally a storytelling device. And so if you look down the figures and know the stories behind them, they're very interesting. And the carving and the detail is just really good on these, and the painting as well. This one sold for $81 on 20 bids. Now, another one sold just like it with the same exact features, and frankly, in my opinion, not as good pictures as mine, for more money. And why was that? Well, here it is. This one sold for over $100. It sold, in fact, for a little bit more than the original $125 asking price when they were new. But the reason, I believe, is because that one sold in May, and I sold mine in June shortly afterwards. And when you don't have the only one, then you are the next in line. If one sold for this level and you sell another one right after, well, who buys it? Maybe the person who didn't get the top bid on the previous one. So what is the next level below the $139 that one got? Well, $81 is the next level. That's what the next person was willing to pay. So when you look at eBay completed sales, or any online completed sales, or even auction records from major auction houses, do bear in mind that part of what affects the value of something is how many people are in the marketplace for it at a given time. This wonderful little Russian box, I was so pleased with it. In the bottom is the oval with 84 and the woman's face next to it. And that's how we know that this was Russian enamel and not a French Champlavé piece. If it was French with the 84 mark, it would be silver plate. When it's Russian with this 84 mark, it is silver. It also has a maker's initial next to it. The only thing is that initial, we looked it up on silver marks, that is a known initial from the circa 1900, 1910 era, but nobody knows who that silversmith is. And part of the reason for that, well, that might be shown in this box here, which got the most money of any of the enameled boxes because it shows the Russian royal family and it is by Fabergé. So the maker does have an effect on the value. This Fabergé piece is very unusual to find. Pieces of high-end enameling like this were made for the czars and the royalty, and most everyone else was a peasant, including the people making these things, which ended up contributing mightily to the Bolshevik Revolution. But the fact that this one sold for $7,800 does not obscure the fact that the one that we had was very pretty and very refined and very nice. And so it sold for $116.50 on 20 bids. Now, another one that was similar in size and a little bit more detailed is this one. And this one sold for $475. But again, the maker is known, and that has an impact on value as well. And then the last item to share with you is this. This is the Lawrence Welk letter opener, the Champagne Music of Lawrence Welk. It went for $12.50 on 5 bids, and it went to somebody that we really enjoy who is a subscriber to the channel. It might have gone for more money if I had taken the picture up close of just the detail and made that the lead picture. I realize when you see this in a thumbnail that it kind of disappears. So that's another thing where pictures do make a difference. But Lawrence Welk was such an interesting person. He didn't speak English until he was 21. His family started out in a sod house in the Dakotas. From that, he convinced his father to buy him an accordion in exchange for working on the farm for 3 extra years. And then he went to a little town called Yankton, got a radio show, became popular, toured the Midwest, got known in Chicago, and the rest is history. He was on TV for years. He ended up a multimillionaire, opened a resort in Escondido, California, which is still there. That's no doubt where this piece came from. There were other souvenirs, an accordion-shaped pottery planter that you see from time to time, metal trays with the Lennon sisters, and he and his orchestra. But the thing that went for the most by Lawrence Welk during this period of time is this. This is a Lawrence Welk piggy bank. This is a very hard piece to find, and it went for over $200. So it just goes to show you that there are collectors for music-related items beyond vinyl. It's not just the vinyl, it's the posters, it's the t-shirts, it's the things like this that they sold, and it isn't just rock and roll stars who have a popular following. So that's our wrap-up of what sold and other things that sold in those categories, and a little bit about how we did, what went well, what we could do better. Hopefully that helps you folks who are resellers and is interesting to those of you who are collectors and trying to understand why other people are interested in some of these things. That's why I love to share these results with you. And I got some very positive comments about the comparisons with what other things that sold. So I think we're going to keep doing that for a while. I want to thank you all very much for watching. And if you're thinking, gee, you sold some stuff, buy it now before I got a chance to look, well, consider becoming a member. You can look at the membership information below the dash line of the description of this video. and see if there's a tier that you would like to participate in that will help the channel, but also give you access to these things first.
If you enjoyed this video, check out this one. Also, click thumbs up to like this video and check the description for information about our Patreon, our memberships. We've got a lot of different levels with different perks and bonus videos and early content. Also, please do check out our website, theantiquenomad.com, for appraisal help. And we'll see you again for more adventures in the antique and vintage community soon. Bye for now.